Hello, everybody. It's that time again. It's time for the OKPreps Kickoff Show, week number 4. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of OKPreps.com. And over the next, close to an hour, we've been ranging, getting closer and closer to that hour mark. We'll be talking high school football across the state of Oklahoma. You see all the helmets here. We got some great matchups that we're going to be breaking down. We're going to be joined by coaches throughout the hour, breaking down some of those top matchups. We'll give you some players to watch. We'll give you some picks as well as some teams on the rise. We're at the end of non-district play, and we're entering now the important games. And when we say important games, if you've listened to the Kickoff Show or if you've checked out the OKPreps Roundup podcast, you heard me talk about how these are the games that matter. And we're still in the month of September, but it's never too early to start looking ahead to November. And these games that are taking place starting this week count towards playoff seeding. Now, there are a few districts down in some of the smaller classes that have already played district games. You already know what I'm talking about when I say that these games count for real. They count towards playoff seeding later on down the line. So a lot of these matchups in particular, and we'll talk about it later on, about some of these matchups that we get on Friday night, they will not only have an impact this week, but they'll have an impact in early November when we go back and check the district standings. A lot of these matchups not only will decide playoff seeding, they'll decide district champions, they'll decide home playoff games. It's going to be a great week of high school football, and we're breaking it all down right here with the OKPreps Kickoff Show. And as we do each and every single week, we remind you that if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our OKPreps YouTube channel, and you'll get not only all of our kickoff shows, but you'll get all of the highlights that we put out throughout the week as well. We'll be at a couple of great games on Friday night. You'll be able to check out the highlights from those games on OKPreps.com, and you get them before anybody else if you subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel, and you'll get all of our highlights, all of our kickoff shows throughout the 2019 season. Also want to remind you, for those of you who don't know, you can also listen to this kickoff show each and every single week because we're available in podcast form, as well as the OKPreps Roundup podcast. You can get the kickoff show and the Roundup right to your phone, tablet, computer, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can get it sent directly there for free, as always. Just search OKPreps Podcasts on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts on. Hit subscribe, and you'll get all of our great podcast content throughout, of course, the 2019 season. But as we do each and every single week, we kick things off with the OKPreps 10. On Monday, we announced the top 10 games across the state of Oklahoma, and we break it down a little bit. And here on the Kickoff Show, not only do we break it down, but we show you highlights from that matchup last year. And we start with our game of the week. It's the number 1 matchup for a reason, as it features 2A's number 1 Metro Christian going on the road to take on number 3, ADAIR. This game was one that, as you see here with the highlights, it was a messy field last year as ADAIR was able to get the win 20-19 over Metro Christian. Of course, this was a week where weather had a big impact on a lot of the games across the state of Oklahoma. ADAIR, if my memory serves me correctly, ADAIR did not throw a single pass in this game. They only ran the ball, and you see the majority of these highlights are running plays as the Warriors were able to get the win 20-19. Metro Christian and ADAIR, both two of the top teams in Class 2A. They've been dominant this season. ADAIR, although has not played as tough of a schedule as Metro Christian has played so far early on this season. That's not a knock on ADAIR or the opponents that ADAIR's faced. That's more of a pump up for Metro Christian. They played Broken Bow, one of the top teams in 4A. They played Holland Hall, one of the top teams in Class 2A. They've been tested. This will be the first test for ADAIR, and I think that it's going to be a great game. We'll be there on Friday night shooting the highlights. You'll be able to check out on OKPreps.com. More reason to hit subscribe on the OKPreps YouTube channel. It's going to be a great game. I think that both teams have electric offenses. I think both teams have good defenses, but at the same time, when these two teams get together, you kind of expect fireworks. They have those reputations of being explosive offensive teams, And so will we see a shootout on Friday night? Being the guy who's going to be shooting the highlights, I hope for a shootout, because that'll give you plenty of stuff to check out later on after the game. But I think that both teams have defenses that can slow the other down. I think that a big deciding factor will be the turnover battle. If a team is able to take advantage of the turnover battle, they're going to get more opportunities for their offense to end up putting up points on the scoreboard. Our number 2 game, it features number 3 Union going on the road to take on number 1 OWASSO. Both of these teams coming off big wins back in week 2. They each had last week off, but both teams coming off big wins. Union avoiding an 0-3 start by beating rival JENKS 35-20 and a runaway win in the second half. OWASSO, kind of similar situation, although they're not avoiding an 0-3 start. They're 3-0 on the season, and they took care of number 1 Broken Arrow. They ran away from the Tigers, and they looked impressive doing it. That defense was ferocious in the second half. Their passing game, their running game, they were doing whatever they wanted in the second half as they wore Broken Arrow down and were able to run away with the victory and take over the top spot in 6A1. So what have we done while we were waiting? Well, OWASSO, they're looking for a little revenge after losing to Union 21-0 last year. Of course, you rewind back to 2017. They played an instant classic in the regular season that went to overtime. They would meet up once again for a state championship. OWASSO would win it back in 2017. That would be the first time anybody other than JENKS or Union won the state championship in the state's largest class. And of course, we saw Broken Arrow continue that trend last year with the championship. OWASSO now back in the top spot in 6A1. This is going to be a can't miss game. It's going to be one of the best in the state. And again, we'll have highlights of this matchup later on after the game on OKPreps.com as Union looks to kind of continue what they started against JENKS. The same goes for OWASSO. They looked really good. Both of these teams looked really good, and whoever is able to carry that momentum through the bye week, you know, it's always tough to keep momentum going for 2 weeks straight, but it's going to be interesting to see who can carry that momentum. The answer to that question will probably give you a good idea who's going to walk away with the victory. Our number 3 game, you go back to Class 2A as we have several great matchups in 2A football this week. Number 2 VIAN in action. They'll go on the road to take on number 5 SPIRO. SPIRO coming in at 3-0. VIAN coming in at 2-1. VIAN dominated the Bulldogs last year in this matchup, 50-14. The Wolverines just dismantled SPIRO. And VIAN, you're kind of getting used to hearing me talk about VIAN on the Kickoff show at this point. And that's because they've had top matchup after top matchup week in and week out. Last week was the off week for them. They did play somebody. They played OWASSO's JV squad. But this is a VIAN team that has been battle-tested already early on. They suffered a very close defeat to Lincoln Christian on the road. They beat up on Eufaula to start the season. And now they'll take on SPIRO, who has one of the more underrated running backs in the state in Malik Robertson. If you haven't heard that name, you haven't been following high school football very closely. And I get it. There's a lot of great running backs in Oklahoma, and Malik Robertson out of SPIRO is one of them. It's going to be interesting. That's the matchup to watch for sure, with Robertson in this SPIRO offense going up against VIAN's defense that has Division I talent all over the field, and they've been able to slow teams down offensively. You go back to that win against Lincoln Christian. Yes, Lincoln was able to get the victory over VIAN, but they only scored 25 points in the win, and that's not like Lincoln, as that's a team that's routinely scoring in the 40s and the 50s, and a lot of that time is done by halftime. So holding them to 25 points is impressive for the VIAN defense. What are they going to be able to do against SPIRO? Robertson was limited last year in the matchup against VIAN. Will it remain the same this year? But this kind of goes with the big picture in Class 2A. All eyes should be on these two matchups with number 1 Metro in action, number 2 VIAN in action. You also have number 3 ADAIR hosting number 1 Metro. You have number 5 SPIRO hosting number 2 VIAN. We're going to get some answers as far as who the real contenders are in Class 2A. I know it's early on in the season, and we mention this every single week, how we're going to get answers. There's a lot of football left to be played. It's a long season, But at the same time, nothing wrong with getting a couple of answers to find out who some of the contenders and who some of the maybe pretenders are in 2A football. Our number 4 game, you have number 5 Del City in 6A2 going on the road to take on number 8 Choctaw. Both teams coming in at 2-1. Del City won a close one over Choctaw last season, 22-20 in their matchup last year. Both teams have Division I athletes. You look at Choctaw, they have Jeff Robertson on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Del City has a couple of guys on defense that might end up playing Division I football, and both quarterbacks are exceptional as well. For Del City, we're going to talk about him later on in our players to watch. Quinlan Ganther has had a great career so far. For Choctaw, their quarterback, Thad Williams, he's had a great start to his career, and it's going to be interesting. Choctaw now looking to bounce back after the loss last week to Putnam City North, but at the same time, we mentioned that game as being a measuring stick game for Choctaw. I'm not going to discredit them for losing to PC North. PC North is a very good football team with athletes all over the field. They kept it close throughout. They shot, we'll hear from Coach Corbin later on in this program, and he mentions how they shot themselves in the foot on a number of occasions. Otherwise, this game would have been even closer. I think the winner of this matchup between Del City and Choctaw is going to be able to challenge Stillwater for being one of the top teams on the west side in 6A2. I'm not saying that they'll be able to beat Stillwater. I'm saying they'll challenge the Pioneers for being that top seed on the west side in 6A2. Our number 5 game, we go to Class A as number 7 Christian Heritage will travel to take on number 1 CASHION. CASHION, both teams undefeated. CASHION at 3-0, Christian Heritage at 4-0. CASHION won a low-scoring affair with Christian Heritage last year, 18-14. Christian Heritage comes into this matchup with a very balanced offense, a lot of new faces along this offensive side of the ball. But if you look at their stats, you break down what they've been doing. They're passing the ball, they're running the ball with efficiency. You can't just focus in when it comes to stopping the running game. You can't just focus in on one guy, as they spread the love throughout their running backs, throughout their playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. And on the flip side for CASHION, they've only allowed 14 points through the first 3 games of the season. They gave up 8 in one game. They gave up 6, I believe, to Crescent last week. So for CASHION, their strength definitely on the defensive side of the ball, but they're also known for putting up plenty of points. So what will happen for Christian Heritage as they come to take on CASHION? CASHION definitely the favorite in Class A. Christian Heritage making fools of all of us because we didn't have them in our preseason top 10, and maybe we should have. Maybe we should have just kind of given them the benefit of the doubt when you take a look at how they finished last year by making it all the way to the state championship game out of the 4 seed in this district. Maybe this Christian Heritage team is for real, and they have some longevity to them as they're kind of carrying that over with their 4-0 start to this season. Our number 6 game, we go back up to 6A Division II as top-ranked BIXBY will take on number 4 SAPULPA. Both teams coming in at 3-0 on the season. This matchup was a blowout last year for BIXBY as they won 45-0. And if you remember again, a lot of the matchups during this week back in 2018, they had weather that had a big impact. A lot of these games got moved to Thursday. A lot of these games moved up in the day on Friday to try to avoid bad weather. But the bad weather was the BIXBY offense as they were on a roll from the start. They got out to a 45-0 lead at halftime. That would end up being the final score as the Spartans would absolutely dominate the Chieftains on the road. Brennan Presley, who has had a phenomenal start to his senior season this year, he had a great game against the Chieftains last year. He finished with nearly 250 yards of total offense, over 150 yards receiving, nearly 100 yards rushing as well. He finished with 3 touchdowns in the win. Quarterback Mason Williams had a big night throwing the ball. Again, a game that they got out to about as fast as a start as you can, leading the game 45-0, really ending the game by halftime. And honestly, they're in danger of doing so again. If you're SAPULPA, you try to just kind of hold sail with what you're able to do offensively. Hold on to the ball. Try not to turn the ball over, because that's what Bixby's been able to do so far. When you take a look at what they did last week against Putnam City, they turned over the Pirates consistently and were able to get short fields. If you go back to that blowout win over JENKS, what were they able to do? They were able to turn the Trojans over, score, and score very quickly. And that's what has allowed Bixby to put up these big numbers offensively. They've been forcing turnovers defensively, and if SAPULPA isn't careful, the same could end up happening. Eli Williams, their quarterback, has to be careful with the football. He cannot afford to turn the ball over. If he does, it's going to be a long night for the Chieftains, because Bixby has shown, not only did they show it last year, but they've shown it in every single game this season. If you turn the ball over to the Spartan offense, they're going to score, and they're going to score quickly. And all of a sudden, this snowball rolling down the hill is very quickly going to turn into an avalanche. Our number 7 game, we go to Class 4A, as number 9 HILLDALE will host number 10 Central. It's been a long time. In fact, I think that this might be the first time that the Central Braves are in the OKPreps top 10 games of the week. They're off to a great start, 3-0 on the season. However, there's a difference between being 3-0, playing the schedule that they played, and being 3-0 and playing some of the other schedules that some of the other 4A teams have played. They haven't been tested as much as they're going to get tested on Friday night in their district opener. HILLDALE had no problems beating Central last year, 50-20. Central, like I mentioned, 3-0 for the first time in a while. You have to go back to 2011, the last time the Braves started the season 3-0. I love the quarterback matchup here. For Central, you have KT Owens, who has put up big numbers through the first 3 weeks of the season. They had last week off to prepare for this district opener. We'll see if that hurts them or helps them as they travel to take on a HILLDALE team that their quarterback, Johnny, I apologize if I mess up the last name, Duroset, he had a phenomenal game last week as they knocked off Ulaga. He threw for a ton of yards, and he's thrown for nearly 1,000 yards on the season already, as HILLDALE is looking to continue their run in Class 4A, being one of those perennial playoff teams in 4A football. I can't wait. We're going to get the answers. Like I said, it's always about finding out these answers. How serious is this Central team as a playoff team in Class 4A? We're going to find out on Friday night. If they go on the road and beat HILLDALE, you know how serious this team is. If they keep it close throughout, you still can't write them off. But if they're blown out on Friday, maybe it was just a case of an easy non-district schedule. We won't write off the Braves regardless of what happens on Friday, but it's going to be a great matchup in HILLDALE. Number 8 game, you go back up to 6A1, as number 4 JENKS will host number 2 Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow sweeping the meetings last year with the Trojans. They won 28-13 in the regular season. They met again for the state championship, and they walked away with a 28-20 victory over the Trojans in the title game. Both of these teams coming off a loss, and we mentioned 6A1, that top matchup with number 1 OWASSO taking on number 3 Union. Both of those teams coming into this week with a lot of momentum, considering the way they were able to win their last game back in week 2. And for this matchup with Broken Arrow and JENKS, it's quite the opposite. Both of these teams hungry to get back on the field to erase the memory of what we saw from them the last time they were on the field. And that's for JENKS. They were bitten by the injury bug. They were riddled with injuries throughout their team, and they let one get away from their rival Union. And for Broken Arrow, they just flat out got ran over in the second half by OWASSO. So a bounce back game for both teams. When you look at this district, we're going to figure out a lot about some of those West Side teams. Westmore, Norman, how serious are they? When you take a look at the big picture in 6A1, could one of those teams jump up and surprise one of these East Side powerhouses? It's still too early to predict something like that. So when you look at this matchup between Broken Arrow and JENKS, it's easy to say that the district championship might be decided right here in week 4. Our number 9 game, we go to Class 3A as number 2 Lincoln Christian. We mentioned Lincoln a lot early on this season. That's because they aren't afraid to play a tough non-district schedule as well as a tough early district schedule. They go on the road to take on number 8 STIGLER. Both teams undefeated on the season. Lincoln Christian 3-0, Stigler 3-0. Lincoln beat Stigler 51-13 in their meeting last year. They would jump up 44-13 by halftime. But if you go back to last season, Lincoln was in that district in Class 3A that featured Stigler, that featured ADAIR, that featured CHOCTAW, and by the end of the season, that also features Seminole. By the end of the season, all of these teams started beating up on each other. They all had similar district records. Lincoln Christian would end up being the best of the bunch. But if you go back to this point of the season, Lincoln would beat up on Stigler, and then the following week they would get blown out by Seminole. So Lincoln Christian, they have to be focused right now on the task at hand instead of looking ahead to that potential revenge game against Seminole. They have to be focused on the task at hand, which is beating Stigler. They were able to get out to a fast start last year. They'll look to do the same again this year. And our final game here in the top 10, you have back to 6A2 as number 2 Stillwater will host number 9 Deer Creek. Stillwater 3-0 on the season. Deer Creek 2-1 on the season. Stillwater beat Deer Creek 49-28 in their meeting last year. Their star running back Quantrell Walker had himself a night. 31 carries for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in the victory as Stillwater was able to knock off a Deer Creek team. They scored in all 4 quarters. They were able to have that balanced attack throughout the game that was able to keep any Deer Creek rally away, and the game was over by the time they entered the 4th quarter. Deer Creek would score a couple of touchdowns in the final period to make the final score a little more respectable, but nevertheless, Stillwater dominated it from the start, led by their star running back, Quantrell Walker. And if you saw our top 10 game breakdown earlier this week on OKPreps.com, I mentioned how the key in this matchup would be the running back position, as Quantrell Walker is back for the Pioneers. He's had a great start to his junior season. And on the other side, for Deer Creek, their senior running back, Tyler Travis, who's at his 3rd different school in the last 3 years. Back as a sophomore, he was with Bishop McGuinness. Last year, he was with Edmond Santa Fe. And now this year, he's having an impact on this Deer Creek team that has a really strong offensive line as well. I think that Deer Creek is improved. I think that this team has the chance to be a playoff team in 6A2, but there's a long way. There's a long way up. There's a lot of really good teams in 6A2 on that side of the district, but they'll be able to play spoiler. And what better way to kick things off than by getting your shot at the defending district champion in Stillwater. If this Deer Creek team truly is a team that may end up in the playoffs, if they keep it close with the Pioneers on Friday night, they'll be a team to watch in 6A2 for sure. That does it for my opinions on these matchups. Let's hear from some of the coaches in these matchups, and we go back to our game of the week with Metro Christian and ADAIR. One of the games of the week throughout the state of Oklahoma, but in Class 2A, that's certainly the number 1 game, as you have the top-ranked Patriots going on the road to take on number 3 ADAIR. And we start with the road team, Metro Christian, and their head coach, Jared McCoy, talking about this matchup and his initial thoughts on the matchup with the Warriors.
ADAIR's really good. We've beaten some really good teams, so it ought to be a great show. It ought to be a great matchup. Both offensively and defensively, they've been good. Their one defense has not given up very many points at all. I mean, I'm not sure that maybe they've had their points all scored against their twos. I've not paid as much attention, but very similar to us, they put up a lot of numbers on offense and then defensively. But, they were in the semifinals. We were both in the semifinals last year. So, the finishing first or second may change the playoff path. But I think you're right. I think they're good enough. I think they might be a little better than they were last year. So, and whether or not we're better, I guess, remains to be seen. But ought to be a great game.
And on the other side of the matchup, you have ADAIR, who has to be feeling confident going into this matchup with Metro Christian, considering that they beat the Patriots head-to-head last year. Their head coach, Rob Gilstrap, talks about this matchup with the top-ranked Patriots.
Well, we always feel like the next game is the most important game, and that's the way we're going to treat this one. Our kids understand that there are some playoff implications involved. There's other things involved in the game, but the main goal is to win the next game. I really feel they're an athletic team. They've got some really good players, really coached very well. Of course, the quarterback can really run. They've got some receivers, some skill guys that can do some things with the football. Really aggressive on defense, and I think they're a good football team.
Union will look to continue their momentum after beating rival JENKS 35-20 a few weeks ago by taking out top-ranked OWASSO on Friday night. Union head coach Kirk Frederick talks about what his team has improved on since the bye week going into this heavy matchup with the Rams.
A couple of years ago when the schedules were set, I think we the four teams on this side, looked at that and thought, honestly, it would probably be best for all four programs for us to have an early district matchup, and just in case there's a repeat later on. But so you look at this and you think, well, this is going to be a tough opponent open district with, but we also look at it from the standpoint of what we're trying to do to get ready for the playoffs, and without a doubt, you'd love to maybe play someone that wasn't number one in the state, and I think top 25 in the nation. Coach Blankship's got a great team going there, and when you first look at that, you obviously think that, man, this is going to be a tall task.
In one of the top matchups in 6A2, Choctaw will take on Del City, and Choctaw is coming off a loss to Putnam City North. The Yellow Jackets will look to not only bounce back, but get a big win over a huge district opponent as we start district play on Friday night. Choctaw head coach Jake Corbin talks about how important this matchup is.
Yeah, it's last week, tough loss to PC North, as you mentioned. Our kids and our coaches all know that, we didn't give them our best shot, and that's not taking anything away from PC North because they're a really, really good team and coach really well, and Coach Laverty and his staff do a great job, and, it could be the most athletic team that will play all year. But if you follow the game, we shot ourselves in the foot quite a bit with a couple turnovers and, and some penalties and some untimely, situations that we have to correct. We're a really, really young team. And sometimes we do some young people stuff in some bad times, and so we're working hard to correct those. Our kids feel confident about our team. They feel confident about our culture and what we believe in, and so the mood's the same. With our kids, no one likes to lose, but on the same token, we understand when you do certain things, it's not going to give you a great opportunity to be able to be successful. And so we're working on correcting those and, focus inwardly on continuing to improve against, as you mentioned, a really good Del City team.
The Bixby Spartan offense has been on a roll this season. They were on a roll last year when they blew out SAPULPA 45-0 and led 45-zip by halftime. Bixby head coach Lauren Montgomery talks about his team's performance this season as well as taking on a SAPULPA team that's much improved from last year.
Well, I think everything around SAPULPA goes around Eli Williams. He's the number one quarterback in the state. He's committed to Texas Christian, a very good football player. Last year in our game against them, some of our best football players really struggled tackling him. He's big, he's strong, he's sneaky fast. He's way faster than you think he is. Word on the street is Tazon Taft, their talented little skill guy who had a good game against us last year, will be back. I know he's been out the last couple of weeks with a hamstring or something of that nature, so he'll be back, and the offense runs very well with him in it, much like ours does, maybe with Brennan Presley. He just adds kind of a new dynamic, and so everything starts, with those guys. Their defense, very, very solid. Coach Borgstadt, has been putting together good defenses for years, even when he was at Sand Springs. They base out of a 3-4. They adjust into an even front, make you earn everything. So they don't give up big plays. They make you earn everything and make you execute extremely well. And if you make mistakes, they're going to make you pay for it. So they've got a very good football team, a lot of excitement over there Being 3-0, they're ranked number 3 in the state. I'm hoping our kids are going to be dialed in and ready. I know we're excited. It'll be our first home game of the year, and it's Military Appreciation Night. So I think our kids they've been practicing well so far this week. I think they're excited and ready to play.
In the matchup with Broken Arrow and JENKS, both teams are looking to bounce back after suffering losses back in Week 2. JENKS head coach Keith Riggs talks about the matchup with the Tigers, knowing that it's a rematch from last year's not 1 but 2 meetings, and what his team has learned since the bye week.
Well, I think the bye week was good for us to, as you mentioned, get a little healthy, heal up a little bit. And, everybody uses it as a time to kind of focus on yourself a little bit. When you get into the season, you're focused on that next opponent. What do they do? What do you have to prepare for? But with a bye week, you can really hone in on the things that you need to improve on.
And finally, we're joined by Stillwater head coach Tucker Barnard as his Pioneers opened up district play against Deer Creek on Friday night in a matchup that features 2 really good running backs. And he talks about this matchup with Deer Creek, knowing that what I know, this Antler football team is much improved from a year ago.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think Deer Creek looks really solid, man. They're lining up, offensively and fullback and tight end sets, with, just stuff that we do. So we obviously kind of like that, but it just looked like they're playing a much more physical game, and seem to be doing it pretty well. So we're pretty pleased with how we started. I think the first half of the Ed Memorial game was a nice wake up call for us. I think maybe a lot of people, our fans and maybe even our kids to some degree just expected that we would just pick right back up where we left off, and we made some poor decisions, in the first half of the Memorial game, and had some miscommunications and things, and caused us, I think we had 7 points on the board, at halftime, and that was like I say, I think it was a good wake up call for us that we've got to stay hooked up and remember to continue doing the things that we had done to put us in a successful place. So the last couple of weeks have been great. Defensively, we've been really good. And even in the first half of the Memorial game, we've given up 3 touchdowns, all season so far in 3 weeks, and feel real good about that. I think that's maybe that's the part of our team that is maybe most overlooked right now.
My thanks goes out to all the coaches who joined us here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. Be sure to tune in on Sunday as we release the OKPreps Roundup. We'll have a breakdown of all the action from Week 4. We'll be joined by coaches in that podcast as well, and we'll have more long-form interviews, not just these quick hitters from coaches all across the state of Oklahoma. But it's that time now to give you 5 players to watch. We do it every single week. We put them in alphabetical order, and we're going to start with the Broken Arrow Tigers with their big star offensive lineman, Andrew Rame, All-American offensive lineman. And for Broken Arrow, the point is very clear as they go on the road to take on JENKS. The Tigers want to bounce back. The Tigers want to make a statement that they're not going anywhere as defending state champs after the tough loss to OWASSO. And when you look back at what they did, or what specifically they didn't do against the Rams, they struggled against OWASSO's front 7. So for Andrew Rame and this Broken Arrow offensive line, I want to see them get back to what we saw a year ago. Be dominant at the point of attack, have one of the top running games in Oklahoma, be able to protect your quarterback at all times, and it starts up front with the offensive line, and it starts with your All-American. If you got him, you have to take advantage of it. Andrew Rame, one of the top players in the state of Oklahoma for a reason, and if he and this offensive line come together and play to their potential, that will be a scary thing for JENKS and their front 7. On the flip side, JENKS, if you're going to be Broken Arrow, it starts by attacking with the front 7 and getting after Andrew Rame and this Broken Arrow offensive line. We go to the skill position now with Metro Christian wide receiver Carson Callaway. In one of the top matchups, you have Metro traveling to face ADAIR. Carson Callaway off to a great start to this season. He's used in a variety of ways for Metro Christian. We've talked a lot about their star quarterback, Asher Link. He has plenty of weapons around him, one of those being his star wide receiver, Carson Callaway. And we mentioned it earlier when we talked about this matchup. The team that's able to take advantage of the turnover battle and have more possessions offensively, they're going to be able to be better suited to get a win on Friday night. Carson Callaway not only has an impact on the offensive side of the ball, but he has an impact on defense and special teams. The more times Callaway has the football in his hands, the more opportunities Metro will have to score. Carson Callaway, the latest player to watch here on the OKPreps Kickoff show. We mentioned Broken Arrow and their struggles by stopping the front seven from OWASSO a couple weeks ago. We're going right back to that with OWASSO defensive lineman Hayden Grant as our latest player to watch in their big matchup against Union. You take a look a few weeks ago as Union struggled to get anything going offensively because of the pressure that Broken Arrow brought from their front seven. If OWASSO is able to replicate that, and if they're really able to pick up where they left off in the game against Broken Arrow 2 weeks ago, OWASSO is going to have a lot of success. And it starts up front with their TU commit at defensive lineman Hayden Grant. He had a good game against the Tigers. He'll look to have another good game in slowing down this Union offense. This Union offense has a lot of weapons. It starts at the quarterback position with J.D. Geneva. Right there in the backfield with him is A.J. Green, one of the best running backs in the state of Oklahoma. And Geneva has plenty of speed to throw it out to at the wide receiver position. But if you're able to contain him in the pocket, if you're able to get a grip on Green before he gets out in the open field, you're going to have success. And that starts with the front seven for OWASSO and their defensive lineman, Hayden Grant. Our next player to watch is someone who we've already mentioned, Del City quarterback Quinlan Ganther. He's had an impact for this Del City team since he broke onto the scene as a sophomore. He had a really good junior season, but he had a lot of weapons around him as well. And so one of the biggest question marks, not only for him, but for this Del City team in general, going into the 2019 season, was how would Ganther perform and how would he excel without some of the weapons that he lost to graduation, like a Jeff Foreman at the wide receiver position. Well, so far, Ganther and this Eagle offense haven't missed a beat. He's going to continue to put up big numbers once again for Del City. And in this big matchup with Choctaw, this is a huge opportunity for Ganther to show that he hasn't taken a step back. Del City hasn't taken a step back. And we mentioned this matchup being so important on the west side in 6A2, as the winner here will have a legitimate shot to challenge Stillwater to be that top team in the district in 6A2. Quinlan Ganther will have a huge opportunity to be one of those top players in 6A2. And if he has a big game on Friday night, and he has all the potential in the world to do so, Del City won't be going anywhere. And our final player to watch, we go to a game outside of the top 10. It's Muskogee going on the road to take on Ponca City, and I can't wait to see what Ty Williams does. The Muskogee junior, a standout on both sides of the ball. He plays quarterback on offense. He plays defensive back on the defensive side of the ball. Last week in their win, he was spectacular as he threw for nearly 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. He only completed 11 passes, 5 of them going for touchdowns. He also had an interception on the defensive side of the ball as Muskogee ran away with a blowout victory. The Ruffers now going on the road to take on Ponca City. Ponca City looking to bounce back after the loss to Collinsville. This is an improved Ponca City team, so I want to see what Ty Williams and this Ruffer team does. Are they for real in 6A1? Could they end up playing spoiler to a BIXBY, a Booker T, a SAPULPA on the east side of the district in 6A1? Or could Ponca end up being that spoiler when it comes time to figuring out who some of the playoff teams are in 6A2? There's your look at 5 players to watch heading into week 4. Moving on to our next segment, as we do each and every single week, we give you 3 teams that are on the rise. These are 3 teams that are currently not ranked, but right on the outside looking in on their respective class. And we start in Class 3A with Perkins Tryon. Perkins Tryon 3-0 to start the season. This week they hit the road to take on Manford. They're in the same district as Heritage Hall, John Marshall, and Kingfisher, so it's going to be a tough district for them to get wins now that district play begins for Perkins Tryon. But when you take a look at what this team has been able to do over the first few weeks of the season, it's hard not to be impressed with them, especially on the offensive side of the ball, as they looked extremely efficient. They've had really good play from the quarterback position over the last several years, but really this year they're getting a lot of production from their running backs, from their skill players, and this has become a very balanced offense. Perkins Tryon right on the outside looking in on Class 3A. They're in that district with Kingfisher, John Marshall, and Heritage Hall, like I mentioned, but if they were able to jump up and surprise one of those teams, they could improve their playoff seeding and have a legitimate shot to not only make the playoffs, but potentially rise up the standings and maybe threaten to get a home playoff game. Now, a lot of football left to be played. It starts on Friday night as they hit the road to take on Manford. We go down to Class 2A and look at 3-0 Perry. Perry, a team on the outside looking in on the 2A rankings. Class 2A is loaded, and I've talked about that week in and week out. And Perry, a team that definitely has impressed through the first 3 weeks of the season. They'll be on the road on Friday night to take on Chisholm, and it's really easy to identify the reason Perry has been impressive so far this season, and it's their quarterback, Mason Drake. He's already thrown for 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns on the season. This kid has been putting up big-time numbers for several years now for Perry, and it's just continued as we head into 2019. And for Perry, this is a district for them that's very manageable. They'll be able to pick up win after win. They'll be able to eventually be ranked when some of these other teams start beating up on each other. And if they're able to make it through healthy, by the end of the season, they'll have a very respectable record. Perry's already on our radar as one of those teams in Class 2A. And we mention it every single week. A lot of these teams deserve to be ranked, but because of how loaded Class 2A is, that just isn't the case and realistic for everybody. But Perry's certainly on our radar already. And our final team, we go down to Class A, Barnsdall, 4-0 on the season. And we're going to find out immediately just how serious this team is, just how on the rise this team is, because they go on the road to take on Pawhuska on Friday night. The number 6 or number 7 ranked team in Class A. And for Barnsdall, it's a similar situation to Perkins Tryon. They're in a district that's brutal. It features defending champion Tonkawa as well as this week's opponent in Pawhuska. In Barnsdall, they were able to beat Hominy last week. However, we're going to find out just how serious this team is as they hit the road to take on a Pawhuska team that has one of the best offenses in the state. They've been able to put up big numbers offensively already. This is going to be a big game. This is one of those games that's on the outside looking in on the top 10 games. And for Barnsdall, they're on the outside looking in on the top 10 rankings. If they're able to beat Pawhuska, they will certainly be in the top 10 rankings in Class A when we make them or when we redo them on Sunday. All right, it's that time of the program where we answer some of your questions. Again, you can throw us your questions on social media, Facebook, Twitter, however you want to get your questions to us. We answer them every single week on the Kickoff Show as well as on the OKPreps Roundup. And we start with our first question. Who has been the biggest surprise team so far in 2019? District play just now opening up this week. A lot of football left to be played. A lot of answers left to be figured out as some of these teams start facing off against one another. But I got 3 for you as far as surprise teams. I like what Westmore has been able to do. We already mentioned Central. And then Christian Heritage. I'm going to talk more about Westmore. Considering Central, I talked about them with their matchup against HILLDALE. Christian Heritage, kind of same thing. Talked about their matchup with CASHION, how great of a start they've been off to. Westmore has been a great start. They beat Moore in their opening game in a game that I thought that Moore would win. Westmore was able to surprise some people and get a dominating victory there. They took care of Southmore. And then what they were able to do last week against Mustang, I thought that game would be close. I'm pretty sure I picked Mustang on this show last week. And not only did I think Mustang would win, I thought it would be close. I was completely wrong on both accounts, as Westmore won that game by 20 points. Their quarterback, Dayton Wolf, who was our pick for this week's OKPreps Player of the Week, had a phenomenal game, threw for 5 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown. He's put up monster numbers already, and he's only played 3 games. Westmore is one of those teams, along with Norman, that you have to take seriously. And I know most of the time you just kind of discredit the West Side teams in 6A1. You just think that JENKS, Broken Arrow, in the other districts, Union, OWASSO, are just going to roll over these teams. Upsets happen. These teams jump up and surprise these East Side teams. It happens, and it's starting to happen, and they're starting to play closer and closer games. And Westmore is one of those teams that could end up surprising a JENKS or a Broken Arrow later on this season. Next question is, how many district championships will be won on Friday? 12. No, I don't know. I don't know an exact number for you. I do know that there's a lot of matchups that we'll look back in November and be like, man, that district was decided in week 4, and that was a wrap. Metro at ADAIR, VIAN at SPIRO. I think that there's a lot of these small school matchups that are going to decide the district championship. If you're looking at some of the bigger classes, I do think that JENKS Broken Arrow decides the district championship there. I think that Union and OWASSO decide the district championship there. I think that there's a lot of matchups that will decide the district championship. Lincoln Christian and STIGLER, although there's plenty of teams that are going to have their say about that. There's going to be a lot of district titles that are decided. As far as an actual number, let's go with 12. I'm going to roll with 12 again. The favorite game outside of the top 10. Always love this question because we're able to talk about another matchup. Claremore at Collinsville. I was there for Claremore's game against Edison last week. They did not look good, as Edison was able to do whatever they wanted offensively. They were able to really control Claremore and control the tempo defensively, as Claremore could not get anything going on the offensive side of the ball. And on the flip side for Collinsville, they were able to get a big win over Ponca City last week. And Collinsville, they're looking to be right back in the hunt in Class 5A. And what better way than to open up district play with a huge win over Claremore. Definitely have plenty of interest in that game in Class 5A. All right, let's get out of here and make some picks, and we're going to start things a little differently. We're going to go from our number 10 game to our number 1 game. So let's throw that top 10 graphic back up on the screen and make some picks here. And we start with our number 10 game, as you have Stillwater taking on Deer Creek. I'm going with the Pioneers. I think that Deer Creek is definitely an impressive football team, but I'm going Stillwater here. Lincoln Christian taking on Stigler. I'm going with the Bulldogs. Lincoln with one of the best offenses in the state. And I think after taking last week off, after the tough win against VIAN, I think that they are refocused, and that could be the worst thing for Stigler. I think Lincoln wins this one big. Broken Arrow taking on JENKS. I already mentioned this one. I like the Tigers to bounce back after their loss to OWASSO by getting a well-deserved and well-earned road win against a JENKS team that's still trying to figure out their identity. Our number 7 game, you have HILLDALE taking on Central. I like HILLDALE here. I still like Central. I think that they might end up being a sneaky playoff team, but some things are going to have to fall into their place if they do end up losing this game to HILLDALE. But I like HILLDALE in that passing attack that they have going right now. BIXBY and SAPULPA, I'd be crazy to pick against BIXBY at this point with what they've done so far in the early part of the season. Brennan Presley is your front runner for OKPreps Player of the Year for a reason. The Spartans have not been slowed down at all so far, and no reason to think that they'll all of a sudden slow down on Friday night. Our number 5 game, you have CASHION taking on Christian Heritage. We have CASHION as our top-ranked team in Class A. I think that they take care of business here. I think that they win this game, but if they're If they're not careful, we saw what could happen in this matchup a year ago. If you're not careful, if you're not focused on the task at hand, Christian Heritage could end up surprising you. But I do think that CASHION is focused and will take care of business on Friday night. You have Choctaw taking on Del City. I like Choctaw in this matchup. I think that the Yellow Jackets will bounce back from that tough loss to PC North and get a statement type victory against against Del City. And we go to our number 3 game in the first of 2 big 2A clashes. VIAN taking on SPIRO. I'm going with VIAN here. I think that the Wolverines, they bounced back from the loss to Lincoln Christian by beating OWASSO's JV squad last week. I think that they go on the road and take care of business once again against SPIRO. Don't overlook Malik Robertson. He'll have an impact in this game. Then we go up to 6A1. You have OWASSO taking on Union. I like the Rams here. I think that Union is definitely improved. I think that OWASSO kind of showed why they're the top team in 6A1 last week. And if they're able to pick up where they left off in Broken Arrow, it could end up being a long night for the Redskins. And then finally, in our game of the week, Metro Christian taking on ADAIR. I like Metro. I think that if they win the turnover battle, I think the turnover battle, like I said, is going to have a huge indication on who ends up winning this game. I think that Metro Christian takes advantage of their opportunities, and I think that in a weather atmosphere that is more preferable for Metro, I think that they walk away with a huge win in a top 3 battle with number 1 and number 3. Again, we'll have highlights of those top 2 matchups, Metro at ADAIR and Union at OWASSO. All right, that does it for me on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I got to get out of here. But one final time, please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel to get all of our kickoff shows throughout the season, as well as all the highlights that we shoot each and every single week, including this week, our top matchups, Metro Christian at ADAIR, as well as Union at OWASSO. We'll have highlights from those games, so be sure to subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel. Also subscribe to the OKPreps Podcast Network. Just search OKPreps on Apple Podcasts and hit subscribe. You'll get all of our kickoff shows if you prefer to listen, as well as all of our OKPreps Roundup shows, and we'll recap all the action from a wild week 4 on Sunday, and that'll be released Sunday evening with a complete breakdown of all the top games. We'll be joined by coaches all across the state of Oklahoma as well, and then we'll be right back here next Thursday with the OKPreps Kickoff Show for Week 5. Also coming up this weekend, we have all of our regular weekend content, including the updated OKPreps rankings, taking a look at the new top 10 in each class, as well as the new candidates for Player of the Week. We'll have 5 new candidates for Player of the Week that you can vote on. Congratulations again to Dayton Wolf from Westmore, who was our staff pick for this week, as well as El Reno quarterback Dorian Plumley, who was the fans' choice after nearly 20,000 votes over the last several days. Plumley from El Reno wins the fans' choice. My thanks again goes out to the coaches who joined us. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's on OKPreps.com, on our YouTube channel, or if you're listening to us courtesy of the OKPreps Podcast Network. We thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Knight. One final time, this has been the OKPreps Kickoff Show.